Yep. Yep. The UFC really just put this in front of us. They really just announced two undeserved title fights to open up the Paramount era. They really did it. They put us with an interim title fight between Justin Gaethje and Paddy Pimblett. And what's even more disgusting is Alexander Volkanovski and potentially his last fight ever doing an immediate rematch with Diego Lopes. I don't even know what to say. I have no words. Just to put it, I'm pissed. And I know a lot of other fans too are unhappy about this shit. What the hell is this, UFC? What the heck? I cannot believe they really went through with this. I cannot believe they put us. Okay, if you want to do Gaethje versus Pimblett, that's one thing. But Volkanovski versus Lopes too, I can't even believe that they did this. When you have fighters like Movsar and Lerone Murphy, who are undefeated guys. But this is really what they gave us. And I made this my last video literally Thanksgiving Day, hours before Dana White gave the announcements. So, it was kind of like, I keep on doing that where I'm just dropping videos on these topics, and literally the very same day, Dana White's making the big announcements. So, but yeah, as suspected, we have an interim title fight, but it has nothing to do with Arman Tsarukyan. Of course. Of course, Arman, after his dominant display of walking through Dan Hooker, is still the odd man out, even as the number one contender, even after reproving himself to the UFC by weighing in for UFC 317 and actually fighting and getting a win versus Dan Hooker to defend his ranking, is still in no conversations about fighting Ilia Topuria or even in an interim lightweight title fight. How could you have an interim title fight without the number one contender? It just doesn't make much sense. Make it make sense is exactly the kind of motto that I would say also to the UFC. That's what Arman Tsarukyan said reacting to this. Now, don't get me wrong. This card is a phenomenal card, beyond stacked. The depth of this card is unreal. You have Gaethje and Pimblett, who are big, big names in their own rights. But again, Paddy, who has he really beaten to get to this point? You had Chandler, Bobby Green, and Tony Ferguson, didn't beat even a top 5 guy, and somehow is ranked number 5. Justin Gaethje, who's been complaining about a title shot or nothing, or retirement, when he's coming off the win versus Rafael Fiziev, he said the UFC was begging him to fight Max Holloway, and that was more exhibition. He kind of just was a crybaby about it, and in the end, the UFC is giving him an interim title fight. So Gaethje's actually fighting for his second interim title fight. I don't know how he's satisfied with that, but he seems to be happy with it, that he's headlining such a big card. And then in the co-main event, you have Undisputed Gold, which technically should always be above interim gold, but it's a women's fight, okay? Kayla Harrison versus Amanda Nunes. The legend Amanda Nunes is coming back. That's a pretty big deal. 2-division champ versus Kayla Harrison, who's been looking insane. And then also, like I said, the UFC needed to put Sean O'Malley and Derek Lewis on this card, and that they did. Sean O'Malley versus Song Yadong. Sean O'Malley this is a perfect fight for Sean O'Malley to get back in the mix. Perfect fight. I love it. He really needs to bounce back with a win. The UFC was pushing him heavy by giving him the media title shot versus Merab. Obviously, he's a big name. A lot of young fans resonate with Sean O'Malley. So to have him as a featured fight is pretty cool. He's taking on Song Yadong, who had kind of this controversial fight with Henry Cejudo. He's looking to get back in. And this is going to be a fun on-the-feet matchup for the most part. Song Yadong could mix it up with some wrestling here or there, but for the most part, he keeps it on the feet. This dude, by the way, has a crazy build. He looks like a Shaolin monk. I don't know, like Song Yadong. He's pretty cool as a fighter, but out of an anime. But yeah, Sean O'Malley, perfect bounce-back fight for him, a striker's fight. This could be a 3-round war. These two fights right here, you definitely know cannot disappoint. There's no way in hell these two fights disappoint. Probably are both going to end in violent finishes. Waldo Cortez Acosta is going on a generational run right now. Fighting for the 5th time in the span of 7 months. I don't know the exact timeline here, but coming off 2 wins versus Ante Delija and most recently on 2 days' notice, and that was 3 weeks later after his win, knocking out Shamil Gaziev. Now he's taking on the Black Beast, Derek Lewis, who had a massive win versus Taliesin Teixeira. And yeah, Derek Lewis, always a fan favorite. This is possibly his last. If he wins this fight, for sure, he'll be on track for one last title run. And if he loses, I don't know. Does he continue to fight just for the fun of the fans? I think it's purely for entertainment at this point with a fighter like Derek Lewis, but this is going to be a fun fight. A bunch of big heavyweights with knockout power and fast hands. I would expect a finish in the first round already from that one. Gene Silva, always the most entertaining fighting nerd probably. Well, that's not true. Prates is right now. He's looking to bounce back from his loss versus Diego Lopes versus Arnold Allen, who we haven't seen in like 14 months. Like Arnold Allen, we haven't seen since UFC 304. But a fun striker as well. This one's going to be... These guys are both going to throw down. These guys are both not going to shy away from boxing it up in the clinch. Some striking, heavy-handed punches. You damn well know Gene Silva's going to be trying to throw in those crazy hooks that he's gotten in Melsik Bagdasarian with. He has the submission threat. Arnold Allen, like, his last win, though, was Giga Jikadze. So, yeah, Arnold Allen. And then, of course, Alexa Grasso versus Rose Namajunas. Namajunas is pretty high profile for women MMA. And then they even threw this in here. Like, this is how deep this card goes. You got Umar Nurmagomedov, the number 1 ranked bantamweight, who I love this. He's staying active. He's getting right back in there. He knows Merab's about to defend. He wants to be on track to rematch Merab, and this is the perfect way to do it. He's taking on Davison Figueiredo. Figueiredo, not the most impressive fight versus Montel Jackson, but he got the win, and that was coming off getting his knee popped by Sanhagen. But I think on paper, and when it's all said and done, Umar Nurmagomedov will have another dominant decision versus Davison Figueiredo. Umar's not really like a finishing type of fighter. Like, we haven't really seen him finish that many people, but still, he brings some pretty good entertaining fights. He's not full on the wrestling. He does do some striking, and I think he's just way more high level than Davison Figueiredo. It's a good fight, though. Phenomenal fight. Umar is probably going to win, and then he'll definitely be the next stop for his rematch versus Merab, because that's what Merab's doing. He's doing rematches now. He's like, you get a rematch, you get a rematch. So with this win, Umar is definitely back for a title. And then even Atiba Gutierrez versus Andre Pulayev. Now, this guy had a knockout very recently, and Atiba Gutierrez, enough said about him. He's been on a crazy rampage right now, just knocking out very, like, mid-talent, but nonetheless, he's destroying guys in the first round easily, making it look easy. He's just a crazy fighter. Young, from Cameroon. Francis Ngannou Jr., hype prospect on the prelims. So that's my point. This card is deep. It's very deep. It's a phenomenal, very stacked card. But it leaves a weird feeling when you have a fight at the top of this card that's for interim gold, because Topuria is sitting out now until maybe spring. He's going through the messy divorce. Okay, I understand that. Again, it's annoying for me as a Topuria fan to not see my favorite fighter fight more than once a year. But at what point does this become like, again, a lot of people are calling this like WWE, because you're putting popularity over the reality of like who's the better fighter and who should be fighting for these spots. Just completely disregarding Arman Tsarukyan, who's been that guy. He did beat Charles Oliveira. He messed up his title shot, but then he goes back in there and defends his ranking versus Dan Hooker. But you're still putting in Paddy Pimblett versus Justin Gaethje for interim title. It makes no sense. At least put, like, Arman should have more of a, like, it's crazy. And Arman said he was ready in January. And Arman even said that he thinks that the UFC set this up. Like, now there wasn't really any family issue, and they're really just pushing along Topuria so they could make this fight so that it's even bigger when Paddy Pimblett comes into that fight as the interim title. Like, it's crazy. And then this makes me even more pissed. Diego Lopes versus Volk. This is a week later, by the way. I couldn't believe it. I didn't realize the UFC was going to do like numbered events like this, but they're doing back-to-back pay-per-views to start up. Not pay-per-viewed. Number events to start off the year. This is literally the week after in Australia. You got Volk coming in for his very last fight, potentially the perfect send-off in Australia. Fight, win or lose, but you want to see him versus a fresh, intriguing challenge like Movsar, like Lerone Murphy, who he was calling for and was ready for. Even Volk was blindsided that the UFC is pushing Lopes so hard to be this guy. Like, Lopes, you love Lopes. He's a fun fighter. He definitely gets more of a pop when he's in the crowd at UFC events. And that's how the UFC truly feels, like, because he's the most popular, and they're trying to really... This is as bad as it gets in terms of pushing someone, forcing someone to become a star, like a Sean O'Malley, like really just pushing him right back in there for an undeserved rematch. when you have undefeated, fresh matchups in the wings to add more to Volk's legacy than a Diego Lopes. And it makes a lot of sense because like they want to maybe they really want Lopes to knock Volk out so he can become champion, and then they have someone to rep Mexico for their Noche events. That's clearly what's going on here, and it's really disappointing to see that this is what the sport's come to. It's really frustrating to be like, I want to, like, the UFC is so amazing, and I'm still, no matter what, we're going to watch this stuff. No matter what, the fans are going to show up and watch and give them the viewership they need because, yeah, but it's just so disappointing and frustrating to see the kind of matchups the UFC is feeding us with when you have these other fighters that have done more and make more sense. But, okay, the UFC doesn't want to put Movsar in because he's so boring. Like, he doesn't do any decisions. But at least put Lerone Murphy in. I would have been happy with Lerone Murphy. At least Lerone Murphy keeps it somewhat on the feet. Like, he just had an insanely entertaining and high-level knockout versus, okay, granted, it was Aaron Pico in a debut, but still, crazy spinning elbow. Is that not entertaining enough for you, UFC? Is that not as big of a flashy KO for you that you can't put Lerone Murphy in instead of Lopes again? He just beat him. Like, it doesn't matter if Lopes in that time got a cool, also spinning elbow versus Gene Silva, who, believe it or not, was ranked still out of the top 10 at that fight. He would have been number 2, but which we all felt like Gene Silva was going to win that fight, but I guess he got too greedy and ended up getting clipped. But Lopes, yeah, it's a popular. I agree with Lerone Murphy. It's a popularity contest. It's crazy to me that the UFC really went through with these matchups, and nobody ever really saw this coming. The interim title at lightweight. We were also sure Topuria was going to be fighting in January. Pimblett versus Topuria was clearly the original goal. And I guess Pereira-Olberg definitely wasn't happening. But yeah, it's crazy. Super frustrating to love and be into the sport, but to see how the UFC is handling just making these kind of matchups, especially to open up this brand new deal for real. But overall, still, the UFC 324 is beyond stacked. Beyond stacked. And apparently the rumors also were that they were going to put Oliveira versus Holloway on here for a quick minute. Now that clearly isn't true. I mean, they would have announced that initial announcement if that was the case. But imagine that, though. I wouldn't be too mad at this main event if they had that on this, too. Because at that point, this card would be literally like UFC 300 level if they had Holloway versus Oliveira on this. But yeah, guys, let me know your thoughts on what you think of these recent announcements. Like, it's just, yeah, I'm so pissed. Like, especially the Volk versus Lopes fight, for real. But anyways, that's my thoughts on the newest announcements from the UFC to open up this Paramount deal. Let me know, and until next time.